नमस्ते एवरीवन, बोलिए सत्य सनातन वैदिक धर्म की जय। क्या हाल चाल आप सबके? हाउ इज एवरीवन? हाउ इज योर लाइफ गोइंग ऑन? हाउ इज योर फैमिली? आज मैं आ गया हूँ, कल थोड़ा मूड मतलब कि आई वॉज नॉट गेटिंग दैट मच ऑफ पावर। आज देखते हैं आज हम कितना कवर कर सकते हैं मीमांसा फिलॉसफी को। आई नो दैट दिसंबर तक हमें ये बहुत बड़ा कोर्स है, ये ख़त्म करना है, हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन philosophy. And this is something which takes a lot of time, right? No? Hmm. तो हम कल स्टार्ट तो करने वाले थे द परतः प्रमाणा डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ न्याय एंड द स्वतः प्रमाणा डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ मीमांसा. The doctrine of the self-validity of knowledge, Swata Pramana, forms the cornerstone on which the whole structure of the Mimamsa philosophy is based. Validity means the certitude of truth. The Mimamsa philosophy asserts that all knowledge except the action of remembering, smriti, or memory is valid in itself. जितना भी नॉलेज है एक्सेप्ट दैट ऑफ स्मृति इज वैलिड इन इटसेल्फ, कि हम जो देख रहे हैं, हम जो सुन रहे हैं, हम जो अपने सामने होते हुए देख रहे हैं, दैट इज वैलिड इन इटसेल्फ. फॉर इट इटसेल्फ सर्टिफाइज इट्स ओन ट्रूथ एंड नाइदर डिपेंड्स ऑन एनी अदर एक्सटर्नल कंडीशन नॉर ऑन एनी अदर नॉलेज ऑफ इट्स वैलिड फॉर इट्स वैलिडिटी. कि हम जो भी कुछ अपने आगे होता हो वो देख रहे हैं, जो उसको एक्सटर्नल वैलिडिटी या सर्टिफिकेशन की जरूरत नहीं है. But Nyaya holds that this self-validation of knowledge is a question which requires an explanation. न्याय कहते हैं नहीं, सेल्फ वैलिडेशन रिक्वायर्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ एक्सप्लेनेशन, उसको एक्सप्लेनेशन की जरूरत है. इट इज ट्रू दैट अंडर सर्टेन कंडीशंस अ पीस ऑफ नॉलेज इज प्रोड्यूस्ड इन अस, but what is meant by saying that this knowledge is a proof of its own truth? When we perceive anything as blue, it is the direct result of visual contact, and this visual contact cannot certify that knowledge generated is true, as the visual contact is not in any touch with the knowledge. मैं इसको एज एन एग्जाम्पल ये कहना चाहूँगा कि अगर जैसे यू आर सीइंग अ क्लोथिंग एक्सेसरी, अगर आप कपड़े खरीदने गए हैं एंड कपड़े खरीदने के बाद आपने एक कोई भी एक शेड का कपड़ा चूज किया एंड यू गॉट इट, बट घर पे आने के बाद यू फाउंड दैट नो, द सेम क्लोथिंग वाज नॉट देयर. क्लोथिंग्स थोड़ी सी तो डिफरेंट है एंड घर आके आपको वो रंग ही चेंज दिख रहा है, राइट? इस कंटेक्स्ट में बात की है कि ब्लू आपकी लाइट पे डिपेंड कर रहा है ना, तो सर्टिफाई कैसे हो गया? अगर ब्लू के ऊपर किस टाइप की लाइट गिर रही है, दैट डिपेंड्स के कौन सा कलर आपको दिखेगा. वाइट लाइट गिर रही है तो कोई और दिखेगा, एंड बेज लाइट गिर रही है तो कोई और दिखेगा. जैसे एक एग्जांपल बताता हूँ. ये मेरे आगे एक लाइट है एंड मैं इसका कलर स्विच करता हूँ, राइट? यू विल सी द शेड ऑफ माय स्किन टोन्स चेंजिंग, राइट? ये देखिए, अभी ये है, अभी ये हो गया, तो स्किन टोन चेंज हो गया, राइट, विद द चेंज इन कलर. अगेन skin tone is changing, right? These are all the different kinds of lights that is given, right? Again the skin tone is changing, again the skin tone is changing, again the skin tone is changing, right? ये भी अच्छी है, this is also good, I can also work with that, right? I hope आपको समझ में आएगा, right? Moreover, knowledge is a mental affair, and how can it certify the objective truth of its representation? In other words, how can my perception, a blue thing, guarantee that what is subjectively perceived as blue is really so absolutely as well? कि जो हम चीज़ blue देख रहे हैं, that is absolutely as well. जैसे if you see water in sea, अगर बहुत ही क्लियर सी है तो आपको ब्लू दिखेगा, राइट? एंड क्या आप जब पानी निकालते हो तो उसमें वो ब्लूनेस रहती है? नहीं, तो सर्टेन कंडीशन से है. आफ्टर माय परसेप्शन ऑफ एनीथिंग एज ब्लू, वी डू नॉट हैव such any such perception that what I have perceived as blue is really so. So this so-called self-validity of knowledge cannot be testified or justified by any perception. We can only be certain that knowledge has been produced by the perceptual act, but there is nothing in this knowledge or its revelation of its object from which we can infer that the perception is also objectively valid or true. Right. If the production of any knowledge should certify its validity, then there would be no invalidity, no illusory knowledge, and following a perception or even a mirage, we should never come to grief. यानी कि अगर हम उसे ही पर्टिकुलर नॉलेज मान लेंगे तो फिर कभी कोई मिराज नहीं होगा, कभी कुछ दुख नहीं होगा. जैसे इन अ सेंस आप ये भी कह सकते हैं कि अगर आप कहीं जाते हैं, many people are putting their face masks on कि वो अपनी असलियत नहीं बताते हैं. जैसे many a times कहते हैं कि आप अपने एक्सप्रेशन चेहरे पे ना लाओ, वो एक कला है. ठीक है, कला हो सकती है, बट आई स्टिल एज अ फिलोसोफर आई फील दैट कुछ तो गलत है कि अगर आप अपने चेहरे पे वो प्रॉब्लम नहीं ला रहे हो तो अगले को वो पता नहीं लगी. क्या यही रीजन है कि पता ना लगे या पता लगे? कई बार जब आप हस्बैंड वाइफ के रिलेशनशिप को देखते हैं या माता पिता के रिलेशनशिप को देखते हैं, तो वो शिकन से कई बार बच्चे को पता लगता है, अच्छा मम्मी दुखी हो गई या फिर मम्मी सही, मम्मी अच्छी है, मम्मी खराब, मतलब कि हाउ शी इज फीलिंग, शी इज स्माइलिंग, शी इज हैप्पी, शी इज अनहैप्पी. फादर का पता लगता है वेदर शी इज हैप्पी, ही इज हैप्पी और अनहैप्पी, राइट. तो इससे फिर ग्रीफ भी नहीं होगा. दैट इज व्हाई ही सेड, तो फिर ऐसे तो फिर इससे ग्रीफ भी नहीं होना चाहिए. बट वी आर डिसअपॉइंटेड ऑफन इन आवर ओन परसेप्शन, and this proves that when we practically follow the directions of our perception, we are undecided as to its validity, which can only be ascertained by the correspondence of the perception with what we find later on in the practical experience. Again, every piece of knowledge is the result of certain causal collocations, and as such depends upon them from its production, and hence cannot be said to rise without depending on anything else. It is meaningless to speak of the validity of knowledge, for validity always refers to objective realization of our desires and attempts proceeding in accordance with our knowledge. People only declare their knowledge invalid when proceeding practically in accordance with it, they are disappointed. The perception of a mirage is called invalid when proceeding in accordance with our perception, we do not find anything that can serve the purpose of water, that is drinking and breathing. How do we get disappointed? We get disappointed कि कुछ चीज़ हमने अपने अकॉर्डिंग सोची थी और वो हमारे अकॉर्डिंग हो नहीं रही है. अगर वो चीज़ हमारे अकॉर्डिंग होने लग जाए तो हम डिसअपॉइंटेड कभी हो ही ना. बट यूजुअली ऐसा होता नहीं है. जब आप मिराज की बात करते हो तो आप डेजर्ट में हो एंड यू आर जस्ट गोइंग ahead and seeing that entire thing and you are very thirsty and you want water. When you don't see that water, then you feel disappointed कि यार प्यास लगी थी, right? The validity or truth of knowledge is thus the attainment by practical experience of the object and the fulfillment of all our purposes from it. Artha Kriya Jnana and Phala Jnana, just as perception or knowledge represented them to their perceiver, there is thus no self validity of knowledge, Svata Pramanya, but validity is ascertained by samavad or agreement with the objective fact of experience. It is easy to see that this Nyaya objection is based on the supposition that knowledge is generated by certain objective collocations of condition, and the knowledge so produced can only be tested by its agreement with objective facts. But this theory of knowledge is merely an hypothesis, for it can never be experienced that knowledge is a product of collocations. We have a perception and immediately we become aware of certain objective things. Knowledge reveals to us the fact of the objective world, and this is experienced by us always. But that the objective world generates knowledge is us is only an hypothesis which can hardly be demonstrated by experience. It is the supreme prerogative of knowledge that it reveals all other things. It is not a phenomena like any other phenomena of the world. When we say that knowledge has been produced in us by the external collocations, we just take a perverse point of view which is unwarranted by experience. Knowledge only photographs the objective phenomena of us, but there is nothing to show that knowledge has been generated by these phenomena. This is only a theory which applies the ordinary conception of causation to knowledge, and this is evident unwarrantable. जो भी हमारे आगे सिचुएशंस आती हैं कई बार हमें उसके रीजंस नहीं पता होते, बट इट इज अ नॉलेज, देयर इज नो सर्टेन कॉजेशंस और देयर इज नो phenomena that is known, but still there is cause and effect, and there are other collocations मतलब other reasonings for that knowledge, or other reasonings for you to observe that knowledge. जैसे मैंने बटन दबाया, लाइट जल गई। नाउ ये लाइट जली कैसे होगी, इसके अंदर क्या है, व्हाट आर द एलिमेंट्स इनसाइड, ये मुझे अभी नहीं पता, राइट। बट आई से दैट ऑन द व्हाट कंडीशंस ये जली होगी, अंदर कितना हीट टेम्परेचर होगा, अभी वो हीट टेम्परेचर कैसे कंट्रोल हो रहा है, राइट। आई डोंट नो ऑल दीज कोलोकेशंस एट प्रेजेंट, बट लेटर ऑन आई विल कम टू नो। but abhi ke liye this is only a theory which applies the ordinary conceptions of causation to knowledge, and this is evidently unwarrantable, यानी कि उसके कोई warranty नहीं है, it is unwarrantable. Knowledge is not like any other phenomena, for it stands above them and interprets or illumines them all. There can be no validity in things, for truth applies to knowledge and knowledge alone. What we call agreement with facts by practical experience is but the agreement of previous knowledge with later knowledge. For objective facts never come to us directly. They are always taken on the evidence of knowledge, and they have no other certainty that what is bestowed on them by knowledge. There arise indeed different kinds of knowledge revealing different things, but these latter do not on that account generate the former. For this is never experienced. We are never aware of any objective fact before it is revealed by knowledge. जैसे आगे क्या होने वाला है ये हमें पता नहीं है। कोई चीज़ है, अगर दूध खराब हुआ, खिचड़ी खराब हुई, कुछ हुआ, तो उसके बाद हमें तभी पता लगेगा जब खराब हो जाएगा, क्या वो पनीर बनेगा या दूध बनेगा, या दूध खट्टा हो जाएगा, या फिर फट जाएगा, या फिर दही बन जाएगी, ये तो बाद में ही पता लगेगा ना, और ये कंडीशंस के ऊपर होगा, तो इट इज सब्जेक्टिव. Why knowledge makes different kinds of revelations is indeed more than we can say. For experience only shows that knowledge reveals objective facts, and not why it does so. Knowledge reveals objective facts, but ये नहीं, why it does so ये नहीं पता है, right? The rise of knowledge is never perceived by us to be dependent on any objective fact, for all objective facts are dependent on it for its revelation or illumination. This is what is said to be the self-validity Swatar Pramanya of knowledge in its production utpatti. As soon as knowledge is produced, objects are revealed to us. There is no intermediate link between the rise of knowledge and the revelation of objects on which knowledge depends for producing its action for revealing or illuminating them. As soon as knowledge is produced, objects are revealed. यानी कि जैसे ही नॉलेज, इसमें नॉलेज को एज अ लाइट भी बोला जा सकता है कि जैसे ही लाइट प्रोड्यूस होती है, वो पड़ती है, सो knowledge is revealed. The objects are revealed. Revelation of objects on revealed. There is no intermediate link. बीच में कोई ऐसा कोई लिंक नहीं है between the rise of knowledge and the revelation of object on which knowledge depends for producing its action or of revealing or illuminating them. Thus, knowledge is not only independent of anything else in its own rise, but in its own action as well. Swakarya karane svata pramanyam jnanasya. Whenever there is any knowledge, it carries with it the impression that it is certain and valid, and we are naturally thus prompted to work pravritti according to its direction. There is no indecision in our mind to the mind at the time of rise of knowledge as to the correctness of knowledge. But just as knowledge rises, it carries with it the certainty of its revelation, presence, or action. But in case of illusory perception, other perceptions or cognitions dawn which carry with them the notion that our original knowledge was not valid. Thus, though the invalidity of any knowledge may appear to us by later experience, and in accordance with which we reject our former knowledge, yet when the knowledge first revealed itself to us is carried with it the conviction of certainty, which guided us on to work according to its indication. जब हमें पहले कोई ज्ञान मिलता है हमें लगता है ये सही है और हम उसके अकॉर्डिंग वर्क करने लगते हैं. But as soon as हमें लगता है कि नहीं यार, there must be any other things available, there must be any other facts that we are missing. उस केस में at that very particular time हमें लगता है कि नहीं, there would be other things as well which should be there, right? Whenever a man works according to his knowledge, he does so with conviction that his knowledge is valid and not in a passive or uncertain temper of mind. This is what Mimamsa means when it says that the validity uh, of knowledge appears immediately with its rise, though its invalidity may be derived from later experience or so other data. ज्ञानस्य प्रमाण्यम स्वतः अप्रमाण्यम प्रतः. With its rise, though its invalidity may be derived from later experience and so other data. तो उसका invalidity आपके later experience से ही पता लगेगा how you are experiencing the later stages. Knowledge attained is proved invalid when later on a contradictory experience badhaka jnana comes in, and when our organs etc. are known to be faulty and defective, karna dosha jnana. It is from these that knowledge appearing as valid is invalidated. When we take all necessary care to look for these and yet find them not, we must think that they do not exist. Thus, the validity of knowledge certified at the moment of its production need not be doubted unnecessarily when even after inquiring we do not find any defect in sense or any contradiction in later experience. All knowledge except memory is thus regarded as valid independently by by itself as a general rule, unless it is invalidated later on. तो ये कह रहे हैं कि अब whatever knowledge is there अभी it is valid without contradiction unless it is invalid later on. Memory is excluded because the phenomena of memory depends upon a previous experience and its existing latent impression, and thus cannot be regarded as arising independently by itself. Knowledge कभी भी independently arise नहीं होती है. Knowledge is always with an object. Knowledge is something that is light. जैसे light मेरे पे पड़ रही है. अगर light मेरे पे नहीं पड़ेगी, you won't be able to see me in life. And when you won't be able to see me in live, then definitely there's no live actually happening, right? सिर्फ आपको मेरी आवाज़ सुनाई देगी. और अगर मैं light as a light in a sense is not the light that you see, it is always अब जैसे आकाश है, that can also be considered as light or the source through which you are hearing. अगर वो अप आकाश का एलिमेंट नहीं होगा तो आप मुझे वो सुन भी नहीं पाएंगे. From space you can't speak, right? The place of sense organs is in perception. We have just said that knowledge arises by itself and that it could not have been generated by sense contact. If this be so, the diversity of perception is however left unexplained. But in face of the Nyaya philosophy, explaining all perceptions on the ground of diverse sense contact, the Mimamsa probably could not afford to remain silent on such an important point. If therefore accepted the Nyaya view of sense contact as a condition of knowledge with slight modifications and yet held their doctrine Svata Pramanya. Mm, 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 mm. It does not appear to have been conscious of the conflict between these two different principles of production of knowledge. Evidently, the point of view from which it looked at it was that the fact that there were the senses and contacts of them with the object, or such special capacities in them by virtue of which the things could be perceived, as with us as a matter of inference. Their actions in producing the knowledge are never experienced at a time of rise of knowledge, but when the knowledge arises, we argue that such and such senses must be acted. The only case where knowledge is found to be dependent on anything else seems to be the case where one knowledge is found to depend on previous experience or knowledge, as in the case of memory. In other cases, the dependent of rise of knowledge on anything else cannot be felt. For the physical collocation condition, knowledge are not felt to be operating before the rise of knowledge, and there are only inferred later on in accordance with the nature and characteristic of knowledge. We always have our first start in knowledge, which is directly experienced, from which we may proceed later on to the operation and nature of objective fact in relation to it. Thus, it is that though contact of the senses with the objects may later be imagined to be the conditioning factor, yet the rise of knowledge as well as our notion of its validity strikes us as original, underived, immediate, and first hand. Prabhakara gives us a sketch as to how the existence of senses may be inferred. Thus, our cognition of objects are phenomena which are not all the same, but do not happen always in the same matter. For these vary differently at different moments. The cognition, of course, that takes place in the soul, which may thus be regarded as material cause, samavai karana. But there must be some such movements or other specific associations, asamavai karna, which render the production of this or that specific cognition possible. हमारी कॉग्निशन जो है डिफरेंट कॉग्निशंस पे डिपेंडेंट होती है, डिफरेंट एलिमेंट्स पे जो भी हम देख रहे हैं उस पर लाइट कैसा है, टेम्परेचर कैसा है, हम उस चीज़ के बारे में कैसा सोचते हैं, हमारा पास्ट एक्सपीरियंसेस कैसा था, राइट, उसके बेसिस पे भी प्लस सम सच मूवमेंट्स और अदर स्पेसिफिक एसोसिएशंस असमवाय कारण विच रेंडर द प्रोडक्शन ऑफ दिस और असमवाय कारण जो कारण हमें पता नहीं है, कुछ कारण जो हमें पता है जिसकी वजह से हम वो चीज़ इस तरीके से परसीव कर रहे हैं, कुछ कारण हमें नहीं भी पता है जिसकी वजह से हम वो चीज़ अगेन इन अ डिफरेंट वे परसीव कर रहे हैं, राइट. The immaterial causes subsist either in the cause of the material cause. Example, in the case of coloring of white piece of cloth, the color of the yarns, which is the cause of color in the cloth, subsists in the yarns which form the material cause of the cloth, or in the material cause itself. Example, in the case of new form of smell being produced in the substance by fire contact, this contact, which is the immaterial cause of the smell, subsists in the substance itself, which is put in the fire and in which the smell is produced. The material causes subsist either in the cause of material cause. जैसे example in the case of coloring of white piece of cloth, the color of the yarns, which is the cause of the color of the cloth, subsists in the yarns, which forms the material cause of the cloth. जो yarn है, that is the material cause of the cloth. Immaterial cause जो है असमवायी करना, that is the color of that yarn. जो कलर है यान का, दैट इज द प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ द यान, नॉट द क्लॉथ. तो जिस कलर का आप यान बुनेंगे वैसा आप क्लॉथ बना देंगे. तो जो कलर ऑफ द क्लॉथ है, दैट इज असमवायी करना, विच वाज द मटेरियल कॉज ऑफ द यान एक्चुअली. राइट, ठीक है. वैसे ही in case of new form of smell being produced in a substance by fire contact, this contact, which is the immaterial cause of the smell, subsists in that substance itself, which is put in the fire and in which the smell is produced. यानी कि जो भी स्मेल है, दैट इज द असमवायी कारण. स्मेल क्यों है? क्योंकि वो प्रॉपर्टी है मटेरियल की, राइट. जब वो जलेगा तो वो स्मेल आएगी, लेकिन जल तो मटेरियल रहा है, तो उसकी जो प्रॉपर्टी है, दैट इज असमवायी कारण. The soul is eternal and has no other cause, and it has to be assumed that the immaterial cause required for the rise of a cognition must inhere in the soul, and hence must be a quality. Then again, accepting the Nyaya conclusion, we know that the rise of qualities in an eternal thing can only take place by contact with some other substances. Now, cognition being a quality which the soul acquires would naturally require the contact of such substances. Since there is nothing to show that such substances inhere in other substances, they are also to be taken as eternal. There are three eternal substances: time, space, and atom. But time and space being all pervasive, the soul is always in contact with them. Contact with these, therefore, cannot explain the occasional rise of different cognitions. This contact must then be of some kind of atoms which reside in the body and sold by the cognizing soul. The atoms may be called manas, mind. This manas alone by itself bring about cognition, pleasure, pain, desire, aversion, effort, etc. The manas, however, by itself is found to be devoid of any such qualities as color, smell, etc., and as such cannot lead to soul to experience or cognize these qualities. देखिए, मनस को बोला गया कि मनस दूसरी चीज़ों को कॉग्नाइज कर सकते हैं, कि उसका कलर, क्वालिटी, टेस्ट, स्मेल, एक्सप्रेशन एक्सेट्रा, ये सारा हो सकता है, लेकिन मनस का अपना कोई कलर नहीं है. और ऐसे ही होगा, आप किसी चीज़ को एज अ सेम कलर कैसे देख पाए? अगर वो ट्रांसपेरेंट होगा, राइट, अगर उसका अपना कोई कलर, कोई प्रॉपर्टी, कोई कंटेक्स्ट नहीं होगा. इन अ सेंस कि अगर एक ट्रांसपेरेंट ग्लास लगा दिया जाए, ट्रांसपेरेंट ग्लास से ही आप एग्जैक्टली जो चीज़ सामने है वो देख पाएंगे. अगर ट्रांसपेरेंट ग्लास नहीं है, वो कोई टिंटेड ग्लास है, ब्लैक कलर ग्लास है, तो वो हमें चीज़ें एज इट इज़ नहीं दिखेंगी. विल बी लुकिंग एट अ लेंस फॉर समथिंग एल्स. जैसे आप कह सकते हो ना कि इस पर्टिकुलर केस को आप किस लेंस से देख रहे हैं, आप किस पर्सपेक्टिव से देख रहे हैं. व्हाट इज द पर्सपेक्टिव, व्हाट इज द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ दीज थिंग्स व्हिच यू आर सीइंग. इफ यू आर सीइंग दिस इन दैट मैनर, देन द सीन कैन बी परसीव्ड इन दैट वे. आप अगर काले कांच से देखेंगे तो काला दिखेगा, सफेद कांच बिल्कुल ट्रांसपेरेंट से देखेंगे तो एग्जैक्टली जैसा है वैसा दिखेगा, राइट. तभी कहते हैं कि जो लोग आपके सामने बहुत अलग पेश आते हैं और वो जस्ट एक्टिंग कर रहे हैं, उनका मन काला होगा. क्योंकि मन अगर साफ होगा, बिल्कुल साफ होगा, यू विल सी द एग्जैक्ट थिंग व्हाट दैट पर्सन इज. कि वो इंसान जैसा होगा, जैसा बात कर रहा हो वैसा ही होगा. ही इज नॉट एक्टिंग इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू. बिकॉज ऑफ दिस कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर और समथिंग, कि किसी को बुरा ना लग जाए, आप अपने ऊपर ये आवरण ओढ़े बैठे हो कि किसी को मोटा कह दिया तो मोटा कह के बुरा हो गया. अरे यार, वो सारे भगवान की प्रकृति के पार्ट है, राइट. तो यू आर जस्ट टेलिंग अ प्रॉपर्टी, मैं मोटा हूँ, आई एक्सेप्ट दैट फैक्ट। कोई मुझे मोटा बोले कोई दिक्कत नहीं, हूँ वो यार मोटा, मोटे को मोटा नहीं बोलेंगे तो ऋतिक रोशन थोड़ी बोलेंगे, राइट? तो क्योंकि किसी को बुरा ना लगे तो हम अपने ऊपर ये आवरण ओढ़े बैठते हैं, एंड मेनी टाइम्स यू डोंट इवन नो कि आपको वो सिचुएशन कैसे हैंडल करनी है। This manas alone by itself brings about cognition, pleasure, pain, desire, aversion, effort, etc. The manas, however, by itself is found to be devoid of any such qualities of color, smell, etc., and as such cannot lead the soul to experience or cognize these qualities. Hence, it stands in need of such other organs as may be characterized by these qualities. For the cognition of color, the mind will need the aid of an organ, of which color is the characteristic quality. For the cognition of smell, an organ having the odorous characteristic, and so on with touch, taste, aversion. Now we know that organ which has color or for its distinctive feature must be one composed of tejas or light, or as color in is a feature of light, and this proves the existence of the organ. The eye for the cognition of color is a similar in a similar manner the existence of early organs of smell, the aqueous organ, organ of taste, the akashic organ, the organ of sound, and the airy organ, the organ of touch, may be demonstrated. But without manas, none of the organs is found to be effective. यानी कि जो भी हम चीज़ें देख रहे हैं, मन हमारा बिल्कुल साफ होगा तो हम उस चीज़ को वैसे ही परसीव कर पाएंगे। और इन अ सेंस जैसे अगर मुझे ये येलो लाइट से बड़ा डर लगता है कभी कभी, अगर आई एम जस्ट गिविंग एन एग्जांपल, तो जब मैं इस येलो लाइट को देखूंगा तो इन माय माइंड देयर इज अ पास्ट एक्सपीरियंस of that light, and because of that I am getting triggered with that light, right? But without manas, none of these organs is found to be effective. Four necessary contacts have to be admitted of the sense organs with the object. टच का ज़रूरी नहीं होता है, अगर सेंस ऑब्जेक्ट्स विद द ऑब्जेक्ट, अगर जैसे मैं देख रहा हूँ माई आई साइट इज सीइंग दिस फोन इन फ्रंट ऑफ मी, तो माई सेंस ऑर्गन्स विद द ऑब्जेक्ट, of the sense organs with quality of the object, of the manas with the sense organs, and of the manas with the soul. पहला, सेंस ऑर्गन्स विद द ऑब्जेक्ट, ऑफ द सेंस ऑर्गन्स विद द क्वालिटी ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट, कि क्या क्वालिटी है, जैसे आप कई बार टच करते हैं तो किस टाइप का मटेरियल है, किस टाइप का टेक्सचर है। Of the manas with the sense organs, of the manas with the soul. The object of perception are of three kinds: substance, qualities, jati, or class. The material substance are tangible objects of earth, fire, water, air in large dimensions, for in their fine atomic states they cannot be perceived. The qualities or color, taste, smell, touch, number, dimension, separateness, conjunction, disjunction, priority, posteriority, pleasure, pain, desire, aversion, and effort. So these are the qualities. Separateness, conjunction, dimension कितना बड़ा, number कितने numbers हैं, touch, smell, disjunction, conjunction, priority, posteriority, कौन सा prior है, कौन सा बाद में है, pleasure है, pain है, desire, aversion and effort. ये प्रकरण पंचिका में लिखा गया है, एंड डॉक्टर गंगानाथ झा का प्रभाकर मीमांसा में भी लिखा गया है, राइट? It may not be out of place here to mention in conclusion that Kumarila Bhatta was rather undecided as to the nature of senses, or of their contact with object. Thus he says that the senses may be conceived either as a certain function of activity or as entities have the capacity of revealing things without coming into actual contact with them, and that they might be entities which actually come in contact with their objects. Shlokavartika, see Pratyaksha Sutra, and Nyaya Ratnakada on it, it may be noted that in this connection, or that Sankhya Yoga did not think like Nyaya, that senses actually went out to meet objects karitva, but held that there was a special kind of function, vritti, by virtue of which the senses could grasp even such distant objects as sun and the stars. It is the function of the sense to reach the objects. The nature of this vritti is not further clearly explained by Parthasarathi objects to it as being almost a different category, tattvantara, right? And he prefers this last view as being more satisfactory. कि हाँ एक पॉइंट पे ये भी है कि सेंसेस जो है हमारे ज़रूरी नहीं कि चीज़ें हमारे पास सेंसेस में ऑलरेडी सामने आए. इसका मतलब ये भी तो हो सकता है कि हम सेंसेस को दूर भी परसीव कर पा रहे हैं. जैसे द बॉटल इज हियर, इट वाज फार, सो आई वाज एबल टू परसीव द बॉटल व्हिच वाज फार ऑफ, राइट. Indeterminate and determinate perception. There are two kinds of perception in two stages. The first stage is called nirvikalpa, indeterminate, and the second sarvikalpa, determinate. The nirvikalpa perception of a thing is its perception at the first moment of association of the senses and their object. Thus, Kumarila says that the cognition that appears first is a mere alochana or simple perception called non-determinate, pertaining to the object itself, pure and simple, and resembling the cognition that the newborn infant has of things around himself. In this cognition, neither the genus nor the differentia is presented to consciousness. All that is present there is the individual wherein there too subsists. This view of indeterminate perception may seem in some sense to resemble the Buddhist view, which defines it as being merely a specific individuality, svalakshana, and regards it as being the only valid element in the perception. पहले बोला द टू काइंड्स ऑफ परसेप्शन इन टू स्टेजेस, निर्विकल्प एंड सविकल्प. ये हम न्याय शास्त्र में भी पढ़ चुके हैं. निर्विकल्प जिसमें आप जस्ट मिनिमम क्वालिटीज देख पा रहे हो और सुन पा रहे हो, एंड सर्विकल जिसमें आपको पूरा ज्ञान मिल गया एंड यू आर सीइंग all the qualities of that substance. The nirvikalpa perception of a thing is its perception at the first moment. वो first moment पे. As the association of senses of the object. Thus, Kumarila says that the cognition that appears first is mere alochana or simple perception called non-determinate, pertaining to the object itself, pure and simple, and resembling the cognition that the newborn infant has of things around himself. जैसे न्यूबॉर्न बच्चा है वो अपने आगे चीज़ें देखता है, वो उसे पता नहीं होता क्या चीज़ें हैं ये, तो हमें बाद में जब बुद्धि डेवलप होती है एंड वेरियस, तब हमें बाद में पता लगता है. जैसे सपोज अगर किसी पिता ने अपने बच्चे को फ़ोन स्टार्टिंग से दिखाया नहीं, अच्छी आदत है कि फ़ोन दिखाया ही नहीं, तो वो बच्चा जब बाद में 15 साल या 12 साल होने के बाद वो फ़ोन देखता है, तो वो कैसे परसीव करेगा उस चीज़ को? हाउ विल ही परसीव, हाउ विल ही आइडेंटिफाई? In this cognition, neither the genus nor the differentia is presented to consciousness. All that is present there is the individual, wherein these two subsist. This view of indeterminate perception may seem in some sense to resemble the Buddhist view, which defines it as being merely the specific individuality, Shwalakshana, and regards it as being the only valid element in the perception, whereas all the rest are conceived as being imaginary impositions. But both Kumarila and Prabhakara think that both the genus and the differentia are perceived in the indeterminate stage. But these do not manifest themselves to us only because we do not remember the other things in relation to which, or in contrast to which, the percept has to show its character as genus or differentia. A thing can be recognized as an individual only in comparison with other things, from which it differs in certain well defined characters. And it can be apprehended as belonging to a class only when it is found to possess certain characteristic features in common with some other things. So we see that as other things are not presented to consciousness without through memory, the percept at the indeterminate stage cannot be fully apprehended. As an individual belonging to a class, though the data constituting the characteristic of a thing as a genus and its differentia are perceived at indeterminate stage, class indeterminate stage में perceive हो जाता है. So long as other things are not remembered, these data cannot manifest themselves properly, and hence the perception of the thing remains indeterminate at the first stage of perception. At the second stage, the self, by its past impression, brings the present perception in relation to past ones and realizes its character as involving universal and particular. It is thus apparent that the difference between the indeterminate and the determinate perception is this, that in the latter case, memory of other things creeps in. But this association of memory in the determinate perception refers to those other objects of memory and not to the percept. अगर कोई चीज़ हम आगे देखते हैं तो हमारी पास्ट मेमोरी भी काम करती है, बट वो जो मेमोरी होती है दूसरी चीज़ों की होती है, उससे रिलेटेड हो सकती है, बट जब परसेप्ट है जिससे हम परसीव कर रहे हैं वो नहीं है. It is also held that though the determinate perception is based upon the indeterminate one, yet since the former also apprehends certain such factors as did not enter into the indeterminate perception, it is to be regarded as a valid cognition. Kumarila also agrees with Prabhakara in holding both the indeterminate and determinate perception valid. इसको हम थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन करते हैं आज के कंटेक्स्ट में. जैसे whenever you are meeting someone new, and it is not the first time that you are meeting someone, you have been meeting different people, and have the experiences with different people altogether, right? अब होता क्या है कि जब हम किसी बंदे को देखते हैं, एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, तो पहली बार तो पता लगता है अच्छा ये प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, ये प्रॉब्लम्स के बाद ये प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, ये प्रॉब्लम्स के बाद ये प्रॉब्लम्स है, फिर उसका सल्यूशन क्या है, राइट? जब भी हम कॉग्नाइज करते हैं किसी चीज़ को आगे जाके, हमें ये पता लगता है कि ठीक है, these are the problems and these are the solutions, and then you meet another person. तो कुछ प्रॉपर्टीज आपको सिमिलर सी लगती है, कैसे वो बात कर रहा है, कैसे वो बात कर रही है, कैसे वो बैठ रही है, कैसे उसने ड्रेसिंग डाली है, किस तरीके से वो बात कर रही है, हाउ, क्योंकि यस, इफ यू आर मीटिंग समवन न्यू तो ऑब्वियसली एक होता है कि द पर्सन माइट नॉट बी एक्टिंग नेचुरली इन द फर्स्ट सेंस. मैंने बताया था ना कि सारे आवरण होते बैठे हैं कि किसी को बुरा ना लग जाए. ऑब्वियसली वो आवरण हमेशा तो रहेगा नहीं, यू हैव टू बी नेचुरल एवरी टाइम, बट सोसाइटी में एक न्यू नॉर्मल बना दिया गया कि नहीं, आपको बात ऐसे करनी है कि किसी को अच्छी लगे. ऑब्वियसली आप जैसे नेचुरल हो वैसे ही रहोगे, तो हाँ, ये इसलिए बोला गया था इनिशियली कि किसी को आप हार्म ना पहुंचा रहे हो, किसी को दुख ना पहुंचा रहे हो। आप उन्हें सटल वे में भी बोल सकते हो, बट आप झूठ नहीं बोल रहे हो। वैसे ही जब भी आप किसी से बात कर रहे हो, किस कंटेक्स्ट में बात कर रहे हो, वो अगले बंदे को पता लग जाए। अब अगर ऐसे बंदा 100-150 लोगों को देख चुका है, 100-150 लोगों से बात कर चुका है, 100-150 लोगों के आगे अपने ओपिनियंस रख चुका है, in that particular case, how do you expect things? In that particular case, बात ये होगी कि आपको पास्ट मेमोरी में याद आएगी कि अच्छा इसके साथ भी ये हुआ था, इसके साथ भी हुआ था। तो जो चीजें आप नहीं चाहते हो, आप उससे बच जाओगे, क्योंकि यू आर नॉट परसीविंग द सेम थिंग विच यू आर परसीविंग एट प्रेजेंट। आपके पास्ट में जो मेमोरी थी, आपके पास्ट में जो एक्सपीरियंसेस थे वो हैं, बट दैट इज सिमिलर। हमेशा पॉसिबल नहीं है कि जो आपने पास्ट में परसीव किया वो अभी भी कंटिन्यू होगा, बट उसके चांसेस हैं, उसके चांसेस है। दैट इज वाई ये नॉलेज के ऊपर ये बात की जा रही है कि नॉलेज क्या ट्रू है क्या नहीं है। द मेन थिंग जो इसमें बोला था कि जो आपकी स्मृति है, मेमोरी है, कि वो वैलिड नॉलेज है या नहीं है। पहले तो हमने बात की थी कि जो हम चीज देख रहे हैं दैट इज वैलिड नॉलेज और नॉट। तो उसमें कहा कि एट द टाइम व्हेन वी आर सीइंग दैट इज वैलिड नॉलेज, कि जैसे अगर मैं इस कंडीशन में, इस लाइट कंडीशन में देख रहा हूँ तो मेरा चेहरा ऐसा दिख रहा है। अब अगर मैं लाइट चेंज कर देता हूँ तो मेरा चेहरा ऐसा दिख रहा है, शर्ट टी शर्ट का कलर, कुर्ते का कलर सारा चेंज हो गया। अब इस केस में दोबारा चेंज हो गया, इस केस में वापस वही आ गया जिसमें आप पहले देख रहे थे। तो उस कंडीशन में जो नॉलेज है दैट होल्ड्स ट्रू, राइट। बट देयर इज अ डिफरेंस टू दैट गाइस। अब जब हम नॉलेज की बात करते हैं तो उस केस में जब हम नॉलेज ले रहे हैं तो उस केस में हमारा पास्ट एक्सपीरियंस, पास्ट नॉलेज भी काउंट करता है, बट उसमें मैनी आर सेइंग, मीमांसा इज सेइंग कि हम जो मेमोरी बेस्ड नॉलेज है हम उसको ट्रू नहीं मानेंगे, क्योंकि दैट कुड बी कंटेक्चुअल, एंड जो हम परसेप्शन कर रहे हैं वो दैट इज नॉट सेम एज परसेप्ट। कि हमारा जो प्रीवियस मेमोरी था फॉर एनी एक्सपीरियंस वो सेम नहीं है जो हमारा अभी अभी का नॉलेज है, राइट। Some ontological problems connected with the doctrine of perception. The perception of the class jati of the percept in relation with other objects may thus be regarded in the main as a difference between determinate and indeterminate perception. The problem of jati and avyavai, part and whole notion, were the subject of hot dispute in Indian philosophy. Before entering into discussion about jati, Prabhakara first introduced the problem of avyava, part, and avyavai, part, whole. He argues, as an exponent of Svata Pramanevada, that the proof of the true existence of anything must ultimately rest on our own consciousness, and what is distinctly recognized in consciousness must be admitted to have its existence established. Following this canon, Prabhakar says that gross objects as a whole exist since they are so perceived. The subtle atoms are the material cause and their connection samyoga. In the immaterial cause, asamavai karana. And it is the latter which renders the whole altogether different from the parts of which it is composed. And it is not necessary that all the parts should be perceived before the whole is perceived. Kumarila holds that it is due to the point of view from which we look at a thing that we call it a separate whole or only a conglomeration of parts. In reality, they are identical, but when we lay stress on the notion of parts, the things appear to be a conglomeration of them, and when you look at it from the point of unity appearing as a whole, the thing appears to be whole, of which there are parts. इसमें पार्ट एंड होल की बात की गई है कि पहली बात प्रभाकर पहले तो इंट्रोड्यूस करते हैं अवयवा, दैट इज पार्ट, एंड अवे, होल. He argues on as an exponent of Svata Pramanya that the proof of the true existence of anything must ultimately rest on our own consciousness, and what is distinctly recognized by consciousness must be admitted to have its existence established. Right? वो हमारे कॉन्शियसनेस पे डिपेंड करता है हम कैसे चीज़ें परसीव कर रहे हैं. जैसे एक ही इंसान है, एक ही इंसान को दो अलग लोग दो अलग तरीके से परसीव करेंगे. Right. Following this canon, Prabhakar says that gross objects as a whole exist since they are so perceived. The subtle atoms are the material cause and their connection samyoga. In the immaterial cause, asamavai karana. And it is the latter which renders the whole altogether different from the parts of which it is composed. And it is not necessary that all the parts should be perceived before the whole is perceived. Kumarila holds that it is due to the point of view from which we look at a thing that we call it a separate whole or only a conglomeration of parts. In reality, they are identical. But when we lay stress on notion of parts, the look appears to be conglomeration of them. अब हम कुछ चीज़ों को एज अ पार्ट्स भी परसीव कर सकते हैं. फिर हम डिफरेंट पार्ट्स को देखते हैं, फिर हम उसे एज अ कंप्लीट थिंग देखते हैं. जैसे this is a part of the entire philosophy. While I was reading this book for the first time in chapter 1 in class 1, you would have recognized that I don't know how these different parts will be aligned with each other. Then I came to know, okay, these were the different schools of knowledge and they had their own vada and samvada on different problems, right? वैसे ही, and this is a part of the entire knowledge. Mimamsa philosophy is itself not an entire knowledge. It is a philosophy, but it is also a part of other knowledge. तो कनेक्शन को संयोग बोला गया एंड इमटेरियल कॉज असमवाय करण बोला गया. Kumarila holds that it is due to the point of view from which we look at the thing that we call it a separate whole or only a conglomeration of part. हम किस कंटेक्स्ट में उसे देख रहे हैं, किस चीज़ से परसीव कर रहे हैं, वो हम एज अ पार्ट देख सकते हैं या एज अ सेपरेट थिंग देख सकते हैं. जैसे आप मूवीज़ देखते हो, मूवीज़ में अलग पार्ट्स होते हैं, आप उसे एज अ पार्ट भी देख सकते हो, लेकिन कई बार आप देखते हो है तो पार्ट वो ना, मूवी बिल्कुल अलग लग रही है. There are few things that are disconnected in that, right? कुछ लोगों को एज अ पार्ट लगती है कि जिन्होंने बनाया है और उसको एज अ नेक्स्ट पार्ट बोला है, उन्हें तो एज अ पार्ट ही लग रही है ना, सेम मूवी. In reality, they are identical, but when we say lay stress on the notion of parts, the thing appears to be a conglomeration of them, and we look at it from the point of view of unity appearing as a whole. The thing appears to be a whole of which there are parts. Jati, though incorporating the idea of having many units within one, is different from the conception of whole in this, that it resides in its entirety in each individual constituting the jati. Vyasagya vritti. But the establishment of the extensive of wholes refutes the argument that jati should be denied because it involves the conception of a whole. Jati, through incorporating the idea of having many units within one, is different from the conception of a whole in this, that it resides in its entirety in each individual constituting the jati. जाति को या तो ये बोला गया है कि आइडिया कि many units within one, all the units, different units are in one, that is called jati. Is different from conception of whole, कि on the whole the jati is different, कि उसकी properties क्या है. But the establishment of the existence of a whole refutes the argument that jati should be denied because it involves the conception of whole class constituting in many parts individuals. The character or jati exists because it is distinctly perceived by us in the individual, included in any particular class. It is eternal in the sense that it continues to exist in other individuals even when one of the individuals cease to exist. जाति जैसे काउ, काउनेस, ह्यूमन, ह्यूमननेस, ह्यूमैनिटी, उसको बोला जाता है, right? When a new individual of that class, example cow class, comes into being, a new relation of inherence is generated by which the individual is brought into relation with the class character existing in other individuals. For inherence, Samavai, according to Prabhakara, is not an eternal entity, but an entity which is both produced and not produced according to the thing in which it exists is non-eternal and eternal, and it is not regarded as one as Nyaya holds, but as many, according to there is infinite number of things in which it exists. Where any individual is destroyed, the class character does not go elsewhere, nor subsists in that individual, nor is itself destroyed. But it is only the inherence of the class character with the individual that ceases to exist. With the destruction of an individual or its production, it is a new relation of inherence that is destroyed or produced. But the class character or jati has no separate existence apart from individuals as Nyaya supposes. Apprehension of jati is essentially the apprehension of the class character of a thing in relation to other similar things of that class by the perception of the common characteristics. But Prabhakara would not admit the existence of highest genus satta being acknowledged by Nyaya. He argues that the existence of character class is apprehended because we find that individuals of the class possess some common characteristics possessed by all the heterogeneous and disparate things of the world, as can give rise to conception of separate jati or as satta, as demanded by the Nayakas. That all things are said to be sat existing is more or less a word or a name without the corresponding apprehension of a common quality. Our experience always gives us concrete existing individuals, but we can never experience such a highest genus as pure existence or being, as it has no concrete form which may be perceived. When we speak of a thing as Sat, we do not mean that it is possessed of any such characters as Sat being. What we mean is simply that individual has a specific existence or swarupa satta. Thus, Nyaya view of perception as taking only thing in its pure being apart from qualities etc. is made untenable by Prabhakara, as according to him the thing is perceived directly with all qualities. According to Kumarila, however, jati is not something different from the individuals comprehended by it, and it is directly perceived. Kumarila's view of jati is thus similar to that held by Sankhya, namely that when we look at an individual from one point of view, jati as identical with the individual, it is the individual that lays its stress upon its consciousness, and notion of jati becomes latent. But when we look at it from another point of view, the individual as identical with jati, it is jati which presents itself to consciousness, and the aspect or as individual becomes latent. ये दो परसेप्शंस की बात की जा रही है. अगर हम एक इंडिविजुअल को देखते हैं तो हमारा उसका पहले ह्यूमननेस पहले आएगा, यहाँ की उसके अदर प्रॉपर्टीज़ कि वो कैसा है क्या है. जाति एज आइडेंटिकल विद द इंडिविजुअल दैट इज स्ट्रेस अपॉन आर कॉन्शियसनेस एंड नोशन ऑफ जाति, राइट, कि हमारा कॉन्शियसनेस क्या कहता है, हाउ इज दैट पर्सन. द एप्रीहेंशन एज जाति or as individual is thus only a matter of different point of views or angles of vision from which we look at a thing. Quite in harmony with the conception of jati, Kumarila holds that relation of inherence is not anything which is distinct from the thing themselves in which it is supposed to exist, but only a particular aspect or phrase of the thing themselves. Kumarila agrees with Prabhakara that jati is perceived by the senses. It is not out of place to mention that on the evidence of Prabhakara, we find that the category of Vishesha admitted by the Kannada school is not accepted as a separate category by Mimamsa. कनाडा स्कूल में विशेष को सेपरेट कैटेगरी माना गया, जैसे ह्यूमन है तो है लेकिन गंजा है, दाढ़ी वाला है, राइट, कैसा है, राइट, विशेष एज अ सेपरेट कैटेगरी मीमांसा में नहीं माना गया, ऑन द ग्राउंड दैट द डिफरेंशिएशन ऑफ eternal things from one another for which the category of vishesha is admitted may very well be affected on the basis of ordinary qualities of these things, the quality or of prithakva or specific differences in atoms as inferred by difference of thing they constitute, as very well serve the purpose of विशेषण. तो कनाडा स्कूल में विशेष को अलग बोला गया है, लेकिन प्रभाकर स्कूल में विशेष को अलग नहीं बोला गया. वो कहते हैं जो हमारे डिफरेंट एटम्स है दैट इज आल्सो डिफरेंट. तो फिर वो भी डिफरेंट को हम डिफरेंट क्लासेस कितनों ही करते रहेंगे. हमने डिफरेंट क्लास एज अ विशेष की है, एंड दैट शुड सफाइस द आर्ग्यूमेंट. गाइस आज के लिए इतना ही. आई हैव फिनिश्ड टिल नेचर ऑफ नॉलेज की हम बात करेंगे कल. द फिलॉसफी ऑफ इल्यूजन, इन्फरेंस को हम दोबारा डिटेल में देखेंगे. फिर हम प्रमाणास भी पढ़ेंगे आगे. तो आई थिंक इसमें हमारे प्रमाणास और अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन होंगे. राइट guys, I'll see you tomorrow 7 to 8. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please kindly like, share and subscribe. थोड़ा जल्दी थोड़ा लेट हो जाता है डिपेंडिंग मैं कब यहाँ पहुँचता हूँ अपने स्टूडियो में, एंड फिर लाइव लेता हूँ. जय श्री राम.